The 8-inch f4.5 and the 17-inch sphere. I decided to make a new all fiberglass configuration to a 20-inch size. So we'll start the construction sequence of that telescope. To make the sphere, I started by building an armature for the 20-inch diameter. This is set on a turntable, and eventually this will be converted to plaster. Onto the armature, a hemp fiber and plaster is initially smeared on to build up to the diameter. With the mass of the plaster in place, a template is set up to the correct location to make the build-up or the final turning. The first phase of the turning roughly turns up a sphere of just under 20 inches. The template is then reset to accurately position it for the 20-inch diameter. A final turning then makes a very accurate sphere. Minor imperfections going to be cleaned up later. For the tube assembly, a similar armature is built up. This would only represent one half of the actual shape. Similarly, a template for the tube with its contour is set up on a hinge board to sweep out the form. This is the tube assembly as it's been swept out in plaster. We're looking at a setup where the two parts that were just fabricated in half sizes are attached to a base plate, and these are made adjustable. Each of the parts are adjusted by screwing up or down against this base plate so that the actual diameter, maximum diameters, fall in the same plane. This shows the master model after it's been cleaned up. The fillet radius was put in place, and it was painted with lacquers and body filled like you do an automotive surface, and is brightly polished. And here it shows it's all set up to do the start making the fiberglass tool. The dams are set in place to hold the edges of the tool. A black gel coat was painted over the entire master model and that part of the base plate which would make the dividing flange. This would make a mold for half of the part. Here we see the half shell laid up with fiberglass and woven roving to a fairly good thickness. This is for the actual mold to make the telescope. This shows the mold having been pulled off of the part. Notice that the highly polished wax surface leaves a very good, accurate surface in the master tool. This is another view of the master model and the part that was made from that master model, of the mold that is, and a straight-on view of that tool. The tool was then set up to start making the actual fiberglass part of the telescope itself. This time a white gel coat was laid in place. This would be the actual color coat that would be on the telescope itself. And then the layup of the fiberglass cloth and the polyester resins. Laying up cloth, fiberglass mat, and then additional cloth. Okay, this is the completed fiberglass shell that came out of that mold. The green on the surface is a parting agent, polyvinyl film that just peels off fairly easily. The mold was then prepared again to do the other side of the shell, and on this one I wanted to have an access hole, so I laid what amounts to a 12-inch plate inside the tool and carefully set it in place so that this modified surface would impart itself onto the second part. I also put a small pocket detail for the eyepiece assembly, which is in the upper part of the tube. This is another view of the same setup. Since I wanted a small flange to proceed up inside of the other shell that was already made, I added this 3/4 inch wooden template form to give me the setback in the detail for the flange. The layup of the second shell proceeded pretty much the same as the first side. In this view, the second shell that we just made is shown removed, and you can see the flange setback detail on that. And then the original shell was put back in the mold, and the edge trimmed net to the tool surface. And then this second shell would then be set in place, and in this case the tool would be used to hold the first shell accurately and locate in place to assure an exact diameter fit. The second shell was then dropped in place onto the other shell with a fiberglass resin paste to bond the two shells together. This is a picture of the finished telescope assembly. Subsequently, this telescope was taken to a solar eclipse in Mexico in 1970. The telescope was used as a traveling suitcase with a protective plate over the mirror, and then I put clothes and things inside of it, and then the telescope itself was inside of this canvas bag with an inch of foam surrounding it, and then it was just checked down the airport as luggage. This is a view on site at Miahuatlan in Mexico in preparation for the solar eclipse. This is just prior to the eclipse. I had put a protective cap over the 8-inch telescope with a high-density filter. That whole assembly could be removed for prime focus photography of the eclipse itself. To the right was a setup with my Bolex 16mm camera on a 4-inch telescope. This is the movie configuration with a camera. The interface between the camera and the telescope were all made of fiberglass and carefully fitting small pieces together. I had what amounted to a medical timer set at the top end of the telescope so that after totality started I could pivot hinge the filter for a clear aperture. That automatically started the timer. It was set for 2 minutes and 20 seconds so that it automatically closed when totality ended, so I would have no danger of burning anything up. This is the start of the eclipse itself. In totality, these are the various range of photographs taken at different exposure lengths. This was at a 250th of a second in high-speed ectochrome at prime focus at f4.5 8-inch aperture. This is a little bit slower, probably about 100th of a second, and slower again. This is probably about a half a second. This is probably about 5-6 seconds, and this is about 12 seconds exposure. And this is the diamond ring phenomena as the photosphere of the sun makes itself present right at the edge of the mountain chain. Upon the return from the eclipse, there was some slight damage to the sphere, and I elected to refinish the entire thing and actually rebuild it. This is starting the making of a new base for the supporting basin. This was the original master model that I made, a 20-inch semi-diameter. A template was set up with a nail or a pivot at the very top, and I'd rotate the template to actually drag out the shape of a retaining edge for the basin. This shows the drag pretty well completed for the edge detail. I wanted a small pocket below the sphere to catch residue and so forth, so here I'm adding a small detail at the very top of the form, which is actually the bottom of the basin. After adding a small detail for the drive assembly, everything was filleted, filled in, cleaned up, sprayed, lacquered, and was prepared to make a master plaster shell. A plaster cast was taken of this surface so that would be basically the visible exterior of the shell. This is the shell shown removed, and it subsequently was painted also and then waxed to make the fiberglass detail. I was going to try some kind of a compression mold. This is the shell completed and ready for the fiberglass layup. This is a completed new base assembly using a better machine suction cup, and I used an O-ring. I had difficulties actually getting this to align properly, and it never really worked successfully. This is a better detail of the drive assembly. I had actually bored a hole through the shaft and through O-rings. I was able to draw suction from it, but like I said, the alignment on the O-ring was just too critical. This is another view of the same assembly. Actually, after drawing the suction, the return cycle would put the water back into the outside perimeter. Well, that was the intent anyway. This is a view of the telescope completed. I did repaint the telescope also in a pearlescent paint. Another view of the same. And again the same.